Welcome to another episode of Safe Space, the podcast for next generation family business leaders. Folks, we have a treat for you today. Joining us, Kunal Amalean out of Melbourne, Australia. Kunal, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for inviting me to this show. It's such an honor to be here today.
So Kunal, before we get started, I just want to share with the audience that you and I met in Australia, actually, in just outside of Sydney. Penrith, I believe, is the name of the location. And I heard you and your father speak, and it was such a captivating story that I wanted to have you on the show. But before we get into that, can you share with the audience a little bit about you, your family business and its origins? And then we'll get into the crux of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm currently sort of, been based in Melbourne for the last 3.5 to 4 years, and currently just managing a personal investment portfolio on behalf of my family. And I work very closely with my cousins in the family office that we have in Sri Lanka and in Singapore. And the family business that we have back in Sri Lanka, we manufacture and export high quality technical apparel, clothing such as sportswear, swimwear, and intimate apparel, where we service some of the North American brands such as Nike, Lululemon, Calvin Klein, and all these established brands as well. So, my father, my two uncles actually started the company about almost 35 to 40 years ago. And I worked in the business for about 10 years before I decided to take a step back and focus on my own thing in Melbourne.
So, when I was hearing you and your father speak, there was this theme that we wanted to talk about in the podcast, which is around closeness. Not the kind of thing you typically hear when it comes to family businesses, right? So, can you share, how your father and uncles developed closeness in those early years and how that transitioned to the next generation? But most importantly, and this is the piece, audience, I really want you to listen to. It's what's been the return of the investment of closeness.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it was just very interesting because I kind of want to take a couple of steps back and talk a little bit about the 1980s back in Sri Lanka. And, it was quite a difficult time in the country where we were facing the civil war. And we, as a family, had gone through multiple hardships. And so we kind of, decided that it's best for us to stick together as a family. But the initial focus was around, survival and just making sure that we make ends meet as well. My dad and my dad's siblings, they sort of joined forces together into this siblings partnership. And they sort of decided that with a close family unit, they were focused on building the business and bringing up the family as well. We with sort of the environment that we grew up in Sri Lanka, it was pretty much within the close proximity, within the same neighborhood. And we were almost, 5 minutes away from each other's houses in the same city. And that also kind of strengthened the family relationship and the support system as well. So their focus was to ensure that the the second generation, which is like my generation, we as cousins would kind of get together. We went to the same school. We would have sleepovers. We would split sports. We would hang out, and we would also mingle with our sets of friends as well. So we did a lot of trips together as well, and that was like part of the intentional planning by the first generation to make sure that we expose ourselves to the outside world as well. And we used to spend a lot of time at each other's houses. It was interesting because we watched various different sports like cricket matches, Formula One racing, which was like perfect for Sunday evenings. And we would also play some of the sports. We used to be quite competitive against each other. and we used to play a lot of PlayStation games back in the day. Used to watch, a bunch of horror movies while making hot dogs at 3 o'clock in the morning, and that was like one of the greatest memories that I would have for all of us getting together as cousins. That was like the intentional work that was done by my parents' generation.
So your parents, and your uncles were intentional. It was a strategic decision to create closeness, right? And now, you have your generation, which is probably spread all over the world, I'm guessing, right? How are you guys intentionally maintaining that level of closeness with being so geographically apart? How are you doing that?
So it's actually very interesting because of the fact that we built such a strong foundation growing up in Sri Lanka, and we were also lucky that some of us also ended up with our further studies in Boston, in the States, and we had about 3 to 4 to 5 cousins all around us, and that was also a really good time in late teens to early 20s to mid 20s. We also started understanding more about each other as young adults, and with that also the previous generation, they were very intentional in making sure that we sign up for some of the leadership workshops and programs. And eventually, we also engaged with a family behavioral psychologist who conducted a couple of workshops with the next generation, with our generation back in Sri Lanka. And because of those workshops, we were able to sort of figure out, how do we set the vision, mission, and purpose for what it means for us to stay united and close as a family. And in that workshop as well, we were able to understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. How are we wired? How do we understand and learn more about each other? What are our passions? What are our interests? How do we really operate? And collectively, how do we really work well together? So that was like a series of workshops that were conducted about maybe 10 to 12 years ago. And to answer your question about the geographical spread today, it's actually it's actually a challenge that we're facing at the moment. And I think the key thing is to be intentional about reaching out to each other for support, um, and also at the same time, we would also try to make it a point that we would occasionally sort of make sure that we catch up with each other as often as possible. um, and we also would know that each of my cousins has their own strengths, and we would know that we could reach out to this person for a specific area of expertise. Whether it comes to relationships or whether it comes to dealing with work colleagues or whether it comes to dealing with certain how do we conduct ourselves in a professional setting. um, and with that spread geographically, we also realized that we're also quite well traveled. And so we would always make it a point to reach out to the cousin at, wherever they are in the world and, just spend time hanging out with them for a couple of nights or something. And now the conversations have kind of shifted towards the Generation 3 kids, who are my nieces and nephews, and they're quite young as well. So it's also kind of like shifting, the dynamics have, shifted to the kids. Um, and the key thing is to sort of ensure that we meet up as regular as possible and sort of, try to strengthen the bond with the kids as well.
Yeah, so because, the challenge is, your father and uncles obviously live closely together. So as a result, the families, the kids, you and your group now, your cohort, live close together. So it was easy, let me rephrase. The intentionality was clear. It was easy to execute the intentionality of developing closeness, right? And that obviously paid off because you guys are close. You said you brought in a behavioral psychologist to come in, help you guys better understand yourselves, so understand what each person's narrative is, because that narrative gets in the way of closeness, right? Um, and that was 10 years ago, right? And now you're all older, right? Life has happened. People have got young families, and the challenge is going to be how do you ensure that level of closeness and what I call, let's call it emotional intimacy, emotional closeness is transition to the next generation, your nieces and nephews, your cousins' kids. How do you see that happening?
That's a great question, and that's also part of my role as the head of family council is to make sure that we are quite intentional in terms of making sure that we we try to organize family gatherings as much as possible. And sometimes some of these gatherings can be spontaneous. Whoever is in town, we would always make sure that we give each other a call and say, okay, hey, let's go for lunch or let's grab some dinner or grab a drink. Um, and I'm also actually working on try to get everyone together next year as well, and just to kind of like make sure that we stay aligned in terms of our thinking. How has our thinking kind of been shaped or changed or stayed the same since the last time that we had family-wide workshops a couple of years ago, and that was before COVID as well, just to kind of like make sure that we're heading in the right direction. The most important thing is now it's sort of a different kind of a dynamic because we are sort of working together as well. So we've also got personal lives that we're dealing with, but also collectively as a family, we sort of have to make decisions together, and that comes with being very clear with our mandates as well. What is the mandate that we try to set for the collective family? And that's with just like what you said, with the first generation, they grew up in the same cities, same neighborhood, and there was a close physical space. But with the next generation, we're just fortunate to have other means of communication and dialogue, such as connecting on Teams or on Zoom. And so it's about making sure that we lock in some time in the calendar and just, keep revisiting why we're doing this. Why is this important to us? What's the outcome that we expect? What are the timelines? What are our roles, responsibilities? Where can we step in for support? So that's kind of like the dynamics that we are sort of working towards at the moment. But I got to say that it's a constant evolution of governance, the constant evolution of communication and the dialogue. People talk about governance, but that, that doesn't mean that the governance is actually set in stone. What has been set up a couple of years ago, that doesn't mean that it's going to be set in stone for the next couple of years. So it's just, uh, thanks to the technology, we were able to kind of, make sure that we understand what are the ingredients, what are the new communication ingredients that we need to kind of ensure that we continue to maintain and just ensure that we keep talking to each other. Um, I would say, those are the key things that's been on top of my mind these days as a head of family council.
So let's talk about, we spent quite a bit of time talking about connection, why it was developed, the intentionality of it, um, and strategically planning for it. Let's talk about the rate of return of that connection, right? Because there was energy and thought put into let's create connection. What's been the rate of return of that on the business? Because I would
Was
really like the audience to hear that when you invest in the human capital, in connection of individuals, there is going to be a direct return to the bottom line, the money, the dollars and cents, the business. What's been that rate of return for you guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fascinating topic. I would actually say that one of the key things, one of the key lessons that we learned from the first generation when it comes to the sibling partnership and working together on a business, they were also very intentional in ensuring that they would meet up every Thursday morning, right? Just to make just as co-founders, as brothers, and as owners, every Thursday morning would always um, be the time that's been allocated for family discussion. And with those Thursday mornings, we don't invite any outside parties to be part of the conversation. Just because it's been allocated as a sacred space for the family. In that, they discuss various different issues, including the business as well. And there, they usually provide some constructive and productive feedback for with each other. And you know they usually so in public they would always make sure that they praise each other, with good progress, good performance, and so on. But privately, they would have some of the difficult conversations just to make sure that there's a clear understanding of how they can stay aligned, what's important to them, and subsequently, if there's like any challenges or issues with the business, they would always make sure that they have a clear understanding amongst owners, founders, and brothers. And that's also like understanding how they can wear different hats as well. Like what's the hat that they're wearing, as an owner, as a founder, and as a brother, brothers. And so I think for us, obviously, with the next generation, like I said before, we've set up a governance system with our family office in Sri Lanka, and with each of those councils and committees, uh, there's a different set of objectives and mandates that's been set up as well, right? And we would also ensure that um, not everyone, not all the cousins or family members are expected to participate at those councils and workshops. Sometimes it really depends on our interest. It really depends on how we add value. How do we really contribute to a healthy discussion? So with that, it's also it's interesting because we work together and we're working together on a business setting, and now we're also working together on an investment setting as well, right? So that's a bit of a different dynamic. Still early stages. We don't claim to be experts at this whole thing, but as long as we have a curious mindset, a curious and learning mindset that really allows us to, push each other and, you know, make sure that we're doing this for the greater good for the family. Um, it's, like previously we used to focus on most of the business and investment activities in Sri Lanka. And that was quite isolated in one country. And now we also have an opportunity to sort of work with each other on a global setting as well by engaging with a multi-family office that's based out of Singapore as well. That's given us access to global markets.
So so the rate of return has been obviously, family closeness and cohesion. And what I'm also hearing is there is a safe space for individuals to speak openly and freely with each other, to learn, to grow. And what I'm also hearing is the growth has been on the growth of the business, right? Like, you're no longer just in Sri Lanka, you've expanded to global markets, you've grown in investments. So there is more than likely, I'm gonna guess, a direct correlation between the investment in closeness at the start of the journey to the family's, call it, financial net worth to what it is today, right? So the investment was closeness, and the return was, yes, family harmony, family cohesion, emotional safety, but also, I'm gonna guess, a massive jump in financial value.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. And yeah, yeah, that's right. Because I believe that before you can think about the business or you can think about the financial return or the investments, it's very important for us to be aligned and understand each other better as a family unit, because we also need to make sure that if there's like exponential growth in the business, and everybody's kind of riding on the success wave, as a family, and we're enjoying the good times. But also it's important for us to kind of like take a step back and you know understand that if the business is a bit shaky, or if there's some downturn in the business, it's important that we have to be respectful for each other's spaces. We have to be respectful for the contribution that each of the family members bring into the business. That we are also trying hard to see how we can turn around, or how we can bounce back from the business challenges. So with that, that's where the communication becomes essential. The communication, it's not just about talking, but it's also about understanding the comprehensive communication amongst the family members. Like, for example, what we say may have a different interpretation of something else. So it's important to kind of ensure that we clarify what exactly what we're talking about, and what exactly we mean by saying certain things as well. So I think it's just more about ensuring that there's an effective dialogue. Um, yeah, and that's also one of the key things that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years. After the challenges with COVID, um, and Sri Lanka as an island, as a nation, also has gone through multiple hurdles as well. So subsequently, as a business, we're also quite affected by certain challenges that the country is facing. So it's again, it's about like developing some sense of resilience as well as a business, because with the business there's a strong set of um, values and principles and governance systems that's been set in place in the business. But it's also important for us to also see and ensure that the business has been surrounded by the right people, the right set of board members, the right set of advisors to shape the direction. And as family members, we sometimes may not necessarily be the experts um, you know, um, at knowing what we're doing. But the most important thing is to listen to others around us, people who are smarter than us. And by taking all that information together, we sort of have to be responsible for the strategic decision making, ensuring that we provide the right direction for the company. And essentially, once we understand the context, once we understand the intentions, once we understand what's at stake, and then we sort of regroup or debrief together as family members, whether we position ourselves as owners or owners, or um, family members or employees working in the company. And that's kind of a dialogue that we have amongst the cousins, and with our uncles as well, our fathers and uncles. So that's important. And then once we come to the consensus as family members, then we provide that direction to the professionals, and that will sort of shape the business decision making.
So this is important for you, audience, is to recognize the power that closeness has, that was intentionally designed, and fast forward the environment that's created because of closeness, to be able to have the conversations, to be able to get honest with each other, to hold each other accountable, to provide feedback in what we call in our firm a safe space. And it all started with the intentionality of closeness. So, we've come to the top of the show, as I knew we would, Kunal. So I always like to ask our guests, the same question. And the question is, what's one piece of advice you can offer the listener, either from a founder perspective or a next gen perspective, that they can take and implement right away? What's one piece of advice you could offer them based on your experience and your wisdom and being part of the family that you are?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, I think the biggest thing is the biggest lesson for all of us as a family is always make sure that we we understand each other, and always make sure that we know how we can reach out to each other for support. Um, I think the biggest thing is, to be honest with you, it's more about making sure that we are on the same page in terms of our values. Like for example, you know, understanding as an individual what are our personal values, um, and collectively as a family, what are family values. And I think most of those conversations and exercises which happens over it doesn't happen overnight. It takes some time. It takes years to build to build on a couple of exercises. And for me, the key thing is to make sure that you also understand what you're looking for as an individual. Why are you doing this? But also at the same time, each one of us have insecurities, anxieties, and fears as well. So I think, for family members or anyone who wish to work together, it's important to acknowledge and address some of those insecurities as early as possible, and making sure that you reach out to other cousins or other family members and sort of see how they can also support you, or how. So once you've acknowledged your blind spots, and you also reach out to others to say, okay, this guy has something that I don't, that I don't have, and subsequently the other person can kind of like step in as well. So it's also about, you know when you're close with your cousins or family members, they also provide other suggestions, other recommendations. And if they themselves don't know the best solution, they will probably, say, hey, maybe might be better off talking to someone else, or maybe seek professional help, or you speak to other members, just to make sure that they create an uplifting environment for you as well. And I think for me personally, at least with my family branch, my parents have always told us, myself and my sister, find something that creates happiness, find something that creates fulfillment and joy in what you do in life. Um, and sometimes it's not always like necessary to find the similar level of, purpose or joy within the business, because it's important for you to kind of develop your own identity. And it's like, for me personally, it's more about the character development, the character building as well, over the years. And, just being really grateful for for the support that the family has given. So yeah, I don't know if it's like just a one piece of advice, but I guess that kind of like summarizes the holistic advice that I would share with the audience.
Well, from what I heard, if I may, I think it's about understanding oneself and understanding others.
That's
Like
right.
really, really understand who you are, why you are, what are your fears, what insecurities, what are your strengths, and then understanding others. And if you have the closeness in place, those conversations are easy to have. But if we don't have the closeness in place, those conversations are impossible to have. So again, Kunal, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate your openness, your candor, just to share with the audience about this such important overlooked conversation of the importance of closeness.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast, Franco, and it's such a privilege and honor to be here and sharing our experience with the audience as well. Thank you.
So there you go, folks. So, as you know, our guests volunteer their time, they share their wisdom, they share their experience for you. because we recognize that being part of a community, being part of a next gen family business can be a lonely place. You may feel that you're facing all these issues on your own, but reality is there's a huge network out there. There's a community out there you can tap into. And that's why we created the podcast. Is it's a community for you to listen to your peers, experts, advisors that focus on these issues. So, if something, spoke to you, drop us a note, leave us a comment, but most importantly, share. Share the show with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family members, so that they too can feel part of this community. Kunal, thank you so much for being on the show. A real honor and a privilege.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.